Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to the news report for day 346 on the war in Ukraine. You are listening to The Account. Today was a rather quiet day and nothing major happened. I grouped all of the minor updates into the usual: the situation inside Ukraine with an update to the offensive guard recruitment and the latest prisoner swap, the occupied territories including Mariupol and Sievierodonetsk updates, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments, with the latest on the Tanks for Ukraine situation and a statement by the German Prosecutor General. But before we start the news segment, first a look at the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Ukraine is reporting repelled attacks at Krasnahora, Bakhmut and Ivanivske. Ivanivske is critical for Ukraine as its capture would allow Russia to cut off almost all supply lines leading into Bakhmut. According to a claim made by the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine, Russian forces were knocked out of some suburbs after a failed attack. The mayor of Bakhmut, Oleksiy Reva, shared pictures of the destroyed city on Facebook. The Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Hanna Malya, stated that this week Russia has thrown all its forces at Bakhmut to force a breakthrough and finally encircle the city. Volodar. The situation is currently calm. At the moment, Russia is reportedly deploying additional artillery and personnel to the area. It is suggested that Russia is preparing for a similar campaign as around Bakhmut and will be relying on grinding tactics. And now, to start the news segment, the latest out of Ukraine. The Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine reported that during the first day of recruitment, thousands of volunteers applied to the offensive guard. As a reminder, the ministry is recruiting 8 new assault brigades. As stated by the spokeswoman for Operational Command South, Natalia Humenyuk, Russia is currently focusing its offensive efforts along the Eastern Front. However, a strike from the south cannot be ruled out. Once again, air raid sirens sounded throughout Ukraine for hours when Russian MiG-31K took off from Belarus. Today, a prisoner swap between Ukraine and Russia took place. 116 Ukrainians were exchanged for 63 Russians. The Ukrainian soldiers are reportedly in bad health and all of them are in the hospital now. 23 are injured or sick and some have lost their limbs due to frostbite. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Petro Andriuschenko, the advisor to the Mariupol mayor, stated on Telegram that the left bank district of Mariupol has de facto ceased to exist. As a reminder, Russia has started to demolish any buildings that were damaged or destroyed during the siege of Mariupol. He further reported that the Russian military presence has increased by 10 to 15,000 soldiers, bringing the total number of soldiers to roughly 30,000. The General Staff of Ukraine reported this morning that Russian forces have started preparing for the evacuation of collaborators from the Troitske district, Luhansk Oblast. Serhiy Haidai, head of the Luhansk Regional Military Administration, posted a video of the destroyed ice palace in Sievierodonetsk, lamenting the senseless destruction. He also noted that Russia has yet to provide normal living conditions in the city. People are living without electricity, gas, water supply, mobile communication, healthcare, education, but with heating points, simulated repairs, flooded apartment blocks, and sweet propaganda. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy head of the Russian Security Council, threatened Ukraine with nuclear strikes, saying, "If Ukraine attacks Russian installation in Crimea, all Ukraine that remains under the rule of Kiev will burn." The advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak, in response said that international law is on Ukraine's side. Ukraine can use any tools to liberate Crimea. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. The German Prosecutor General, Peter Frank, has stated that Germany has collected evidence of hundreds of war crimes cases in Ukraine with pieces of evidence in the 3-digit range, and there is a need for a judicial process at international level. Frank also said that Russian involvement behind the explosions on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines could not be proven at the moment, and the investigations are ongoing. France and Italy will supply Ukraine with an SAMP-T medium-range air defense missile system this spring to help the country defend itself against attacks by Russian drones, missiles and aircrafts. Chinese state-owned companies provide Moscow with navigation equipment, jamming technology and fighter jet parts, custom records show. Dual-use equipment that can be used for civilian and military purposes appears to be coming from China mainly, according to the analysis of over 84,000 shipments. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainian military is quickly mastering Challenger 2 tanks. This week, the tankers have already mastered the control of the tank. António Costa, Prime Minister of Portugal, stated that his country would send Leopard 2 battle tanks to the armed forces of Ukraine. He also added that a logistical operation to return some of the tanks was currently undergoing with Germany. While Anita Anand, Minister of National Defense of Canada, reported that the first Leopard 2 tank has left Canada for Ukraine, Germany's tank partners, who put pressure on Berlin and the Chancellor regarding the transfer of heavy tanks to Ukraine, are now hesitant about keeping their promises. And now for the Intelligence Report segment, starting as usual with the UK Ministry of Defense. The Russian military has formally integrated occupied areas of Ukraine into its southern military district. On February 3, 2023, Russian state news agency TASS reported that the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics and the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions are being placed under the three-star command, which is headquartered in Rostov-on-Don. This follows Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu's January announcement that military expansion would include the establishment of self-sufficient force groupings in Ukraine. The move highlights that the Russian military likely aspires to integrate newly occupied territory into a long-term strategic posture. However, it is unlikely to have an immediate impact on the campaign. Russia currently deploys forces from across all of Russia's military districts, commanded by an ad hoc deployed headquarters. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the researchers, Russian officials continue their efforts to portray the war in Ukraine as an existential threat to Russia. Bryansk and Kursk have extended the yellow level of terrorist threat indefinitely and will likely use this to escalate law enforcement measures to crack down on opposition movements. Additionally, the Institute points out that Russian President Vladimir Putin continues his campaign against opposition in the Russian information space. Several critical mill bloggers have been arrested by Russian authorities over the past day. This is likely a crackdown on opposition outlets directly opposing the Kremlin's narrative. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The enemy is regrouping in separate directions. The main efforts are focused on conducting offensive operations in the Kupiansk, Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Novopavlivka directions. In order to replenish the losses in manpower, the enemy is trying to attract convicted women to participate in hostilities. Over the course of a week, the occupiers recruited about 50 people from the women's correctional colony of the city of Snishne in the temporarily occupied territory of the Donetsk region. It is also known that they were sent to the territory of the Russian Federation for training. And with that, today's report is finished. If you're interested in any of the articles, as usual, you can find the links in the description. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.